What if I told you the apocalypse already happened, and it wasn't fire or flood, but a sky that forgot how to shine? You wake in 536 AD to a world drained of color. The sun hangs like a tarnished coin behind a veil of ash, its light weak enough to stare at without blinking. Frost clings to July wheat. Birds lie stiff in the fields, their songs snuffed out mid-note. This is how the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper of cold breath fogging before your face. Statistically, you won't survive this. Neither will most of humanity. So before you get comfortable, hit that like button and subscribe. But only if you enjoy staring into history's darkest mirror. Now, dim the lights. Let's begin. Your cracked hands fumble with the door latch. Outside, villagers huddle like shadows, their whispers sharp with panic. The gods are angry, mutters the blacksmith. The Christian god or the old ones, snaps the midwife. You don't care which deity screwed up. You're too busy counting ribs on the starving dog that used to guard the granary. Mainstream science would later find sulfate spikes in Greenland ice cores, proof of a volcanic eruption so massive it chilled the planet. But which volcano? Historians still fistfight over Ilopango versus Krakatoa versus some forgotten hellmouth. Here's a quirky tidbit. Byzantine scribe Procopius wrote, "The sun shone without brightness, like the moon, for 18 months. Try explaining that without getting burned as a heretic. The ash falls like a slow, silent curse. Not the dramatic, choking clouds of Pompeii, just the fine gray dust that coats your bread, your lips, the tears on your child's face. You spit, and your saliva leaves a charcoal streak on the frozen ground. The village well now tastes like licking a sword, metallic and wrong. At night, you catch yourself staring at the sky, searching for stars that haven't been seen in months. The moon, when it appears, looks like a cataract-clouded eye. News travels in fragments, each more horrifying than the last. A leather-faced trader claims the Alps are littered with frozen corpses, their mouths stuffed with grass. Saw a woman in Milan, he mutters, trying to sell her shadow for a handful of barley. You laugh, you can't help it, until you notice your neighbor's toddler gnawing on a boiled belt. Gallows humor dies fast when the gallows are the only thing left standing. Modern scientists would later study tree rings from this era and find something chilling. 536's growth lines are thinner than a hair's breadth. Trees basically stopped growing for a decade. Here's a macabre aside. When researchers sampled those ice cores, one described the taste as like licking a 9-volt battery dipped in bile. Fringe theories spread faster than the blight. A one-eyed monk insists dragons stirred in their volcanic lairs. The miller's wife whispers that the stars have gone to war. You secretly wonder if the stars just left. The real scholarly debate? Whether this was one eruption or a volcanic 1-2 punch. Because, as you're about to learn, the ash was just the opening act. Your stomach growls like a wounded wolf as you kick at the frozen dirt. The third failed harvest in a row. Or is it the fourth? Time blurs when every day tastes like boiled oak bark and regret. Last night, you dreamt of bread so vividly you woke chewing your own tongue. Across the field, old Marta digs for earthworms with fingers bent like claws. When she finds one, she doesn't even bother cooking it. In Constantinople, Emperor Justinian boasts of feeding the masses with Christian charity. But out here, The only charity comes from crows too starved to flee your traps. A traveling monk shows you his latest invention, clay bread, made from riverbank silt and crushed acorns. It shatters teeth but fills bellies for an hour. Historians still argue whether famine or plague killed more, but you've got skin stretched over your ribs like parchment on a drum. Numbers don't matter when your little sister's whimpers keep time with your heartbeat. Archaeologists will later find gnawed human bones from this era, femurs split lengthwise for marrow. Here's a detail they rarely mention: the teeth marks are small. Meanwhile, the fat merchant who once mocked your village now offers his wife's silk gowns for a sack of moldy rye. You spit at his feet. Hunger steals dignity, but some lines even starvation can't cross. The fever hits like a thief in the night. One moment you're dragging water from the poisoned well, the next you're writhing on your pallet as your own sweat pools beneath you like a tepid moat. Your left armpit swells first, the bubo pulsing like a second heart. When the black blossoms appear on your thighs, even the village priest won't meet your eyes. Plague, he murmurs, sketching the cross in the air between you like a shield. The word slithers through your delirium, sticky as the pus oozing down your ribs. For months, rumors slithered up the trade routes. Alexandria's harbor choked with bloated corpses, Antioch's streets paved with burning bodies. You'd prayed they were exaggerations. Now, as the stench of your own rotting flesh fills your nostrils, you understand why survivors say the plague isn't just a disease. It's a presence, thick in the air like the ash that birthed it. Modern epidemiologists still bicker whether Yersinia pestis rode grain ships from Egypt or migrated with climate-desperate rats. You just know it's here, and it's hungry. Your mother slaps a live chicken against your swelling. The bird's frantic squawks harmonize with your moans as its feathers mat with your sweat. Somewhere a nun whispers revelations, and there shall be darkness and hunger and a great dying. You'd argue if your tongue wasn't swollen to sandpaper. Here's a darkly comic footnote. Byzantine doctors prescribed powdered emeralds. Spoiler, the only thing it cured was patients' bank accounts. The last thing you see before the fever drags you under is your brother drawing a soot-black cross on your door. Outside, the drunkard who lost 3 children yesterday sings a lullaby to the moon. Turns out, the apocalypse has a soundtrack. Constantinople reeks of rotting hope. You shuffle through streets that once dazzled with mosaics, now littered with bodies wrapped in whatever rags families could spare. A glint catches your eye. Some desperate soul pried the gold halo from a saint's icon. The city guards don't even blink. They're too busy loading corpses onto barges, their faces wrapped in vinegar-soaked cloths against the stench. One body slips into the water with barely a splash. No one bothers to fish it out. You remember this city when Syrian perfumers and African diplomats crowded these avenues. Now the only foreigners are the rats, grown fat as cats on imperial decay. Justinian's dream of Rome reborn? Crumbling faster than his plague-riddled tax base. Here's the brutal irony. The emperor himself survived the plague last year. Some say God spared him for greater punishments. Historians still debate whether his body count laws, looters get impaled within hours, kept order, or just added variety to the corpse piles. A commotion erupts near the Forum of Constantine. A government slave nails up another edict. All citizens to receive grain rations at the docks. You almost laugh. Last week's ration was 2 cups of barley so weevil-ridden it practically crawled into your mouth. But you'll queue anyway, because here's a survival truth no chronicler mentions. The wealthy die faster in famines. Their gold can't buy immunity, and their soft bodies fold quicker than a peasant's. Your calloused hands and half-empty stomach, suddenly valuable assets. At dusk, still too early thanks to that damned eternal haze, you spot the silk merchant who once mocked your village accent. His velvet robes are gone, replaced by lice-ridden sackcloth. When your eyes meet, he looks away first. The plague takes everything, even pride. The Yangtze River lies naked before you, a cracked, gaping wound where monsoon-swollen waters should be thrashing against the banks. Peasants kneel in the cracked mud, praying to river gods who clearly quit their jobs. A child licks moisture from a stone. You don't tell them about the Byzantine wheat fields dying under the same cursed sky. The world's misery feels smaller when you realize everyone's starving together. In Luoyang's palace, ministers scribble edicts blaming moral decay for the drought. Funny how rulers never blame cosmic disasters on their own incompetence. The imperial granaries stand empty, their guards bribed with promises no one intends to keep. A wandering monk shows you a painting of black snow falling on the emperor's courtyard. "Heaven's judgment," he croaks. You don't mention the gray slush that stung your face last winter, how it smelled like burnt hair and dead matches. Historians still debate whether China suffered worse than Europe. The Book of Wei documents families eating yellow powder, a poetic term for dirt mixed with bark. Modern archaeologists find skeletons with teeth worn down from chewing grit. Here's the cruelest twist. Some peasant revolts weren't for food, but for swift executions. When starvation becomes the slowest form of torture, the axe feels like mercy. You hitch a ride on an ox cart, the animal's hip bones jutting like ship prows. The merchant brags about his cargo, dragon bones for apothecaries. When the tarp flaps open, you see human skulls stacked like melons. Business must be good. The dead are the only ones still putting on weight. Your quill scratches across the vellum like a mouse's dying squeals. The scriptorium's cold gnaws at your fingers. Not the clean chill of piety, but the damp, bone-deep freeze of a monastery that burned its last chair for warmth. Outside, frost glazes what should be summer barley. Brother Finian claims this is God testing Ireland. You know better. You've read Pliny's accounts of Vesuvius. This isn't divine wrath, just geology with a grudge. The Annals of Ulster will record a failure of bread from 536 to 539 AD. Not the way Abbot Coleman traded the silver chalice for a half-rotten seal carcass. Not how Brother Podrick wept as he boiled nettles with stolen gull eggs. But you smuggle truths between the lines, in the shaky ink where you wrote of chieftains' deaths, in the cramped margins where parchment became as precious as meat. Here's a fact future scholars will cherish. While Constantinople burned corpses, Irish monks preserved Aristotle by fish oil candlelight. The stench could peel frescoes off walls. Quirky addendum? Some manuscripts from this era bear tiny nibble marks. Turns out even holy texts look edible after 3 days without supper. Tonight, as you thaw your hands over a stolen candle stub, you find Brother Chiaran's hidden marginalia. If this is God's plan, he's drunker than a Breton sailor. You add your own heresy below. Or maybe the plan's just shit. Outside, the wind screams through barren fields like a widow who's forgotten how to weep. The tavern air hangs thick with pipe smoke and desperation as the argument rages. A red-faced Lombard trader slams his tankard down, splattering sour wine across the table. "It's divine punishment," he bellows. "The Aryans poisoned the skies with their heresy." A Syrian merchant rolls his eyes. You've noticed the educated ones do that often these days. Volcano, he mutters in broken Latin. Mount Krakatoa, Spice Islands. You blank. There are lands beyond India? 3 years into the catastrophe, theories have grown wilder than a beggar's beard. You've heard priests blame Sabbath breakers, Norse traders whisper of Fenrir swallowing the sun, and a particularly drunk Gaul describe an underworld forge belching smoke. The truth lies frozen in time, literally. Modern ice cores show not one, but 2 sulfate spikes around 536 AD. Nature didn't just punch civilization in the gut, it came back for the knockout kick. Historians still brawl over the culprit. Was it Ilapongo's eruption, 100 times mightier than Mount St. Helens? Or Alaska's mysterious unknown volcano, whose ash footprint emerged in 2018 ice studies? You don't care about academic duels when your village is eating its dead. But here's a macabre survival tip. Volcanic ash makes stellar toothpaste. The legions used it for centuries. If you live, at least you'll greet doom with pearly whites. As you leave, the Syrian presses a clay trinket into your palm, a crude volcano spewing ash. For luck, he says. You pocket it, wondering if the force that broke the world might also somehow save it. The meat is stringy and tastes faintly of copper. You focus on the fire's crackle, the way old Marta spits out a knucklebone and makes the sign of the cross. Even in damnation, some lines still matter. It began with rumors of forest meat traded at dusk, venison suspiciously free of hoof or antler. Then the miller's boy vanished fetching water. Now, when a neighbor slides an extra portion onto your trencher, you ask no questions. The church declares cannibalism the ultimate sin, but hunger rewrites scripture faster than any priest. A traveling friar claims Venetian laws burn man-eaters alive in iron cages. You wonder how many judges pick their teeth with the evidence. Historians still debate whether widespread cannibalism occurred or was just medieval slander, but you've seen the proof. The way conversation dies when certain names are mentioned, the femurs cracked open like walnuts. Here's a fact archaeologists tiptoe around. Mass graves from this era show butcher marks identical to those on livestock bones. The darkest joke? The wealthy suffer too. A noblewoman paid a fortune for exotic pork that turned out to be her missing maid. Now she wears the girl's finger bones as a rosary. Penance, she calls it. You swallow another greasy mouthful and pretend it's mutton. Outside, the wind carries the scent of roasting meat from what used to be the cobbler's house. Some hungers never leave, even when the food's long gone. The preacher's voice cracks like splitting ice as he brandishes a charred oak branch. Repent! Ash flakes from his beard onto the starving crowd. The 5th trumpet sounds! You remember Revelation's promised 5 months of locust torment. It's been 3 years. Either God's terrible at math or this zealot's full of shit. Doomsday peddlers thrive in famine like maggots on meat. Jerusalem buzzes about a barefoot madman claiming to be Enoch reborn. In Gaul, a nun's stigmata oozes black plague nectar. Here in your dying village, the preacher shrieks of a fire baptism coming, conveniently after collecting all valuables for safekeeping. His followers look suspiciously well-fed for Armageddon enthusiasts. Historians still argue whether 536 birthed new faiths or resurrected old ones. The uncomfortable truth? Some cults flourished. The Skoptsi in Russia took castration as divine insurance. Awkward survival strategy. Persian Zoroastrians built towers of silence faster than corpses could fill them. Meanwhile, you spot the preacher's son trading a widow's last copper for a loaf of bread, then pocketing both. As the crowd wails, you slip toward the woods. Let them grovel for salvation. You've got rabbit snares to check, and the growing suspicion that if gods exist, they're probably taking bets on how this ends. The Silk Road caravan is 3 weeks overdue. You pace the abandoned stable yard, kicking up dust where 50 Arabian stallions once stood. No spices from India, no jade from Khotan. Just a half-mad survivor babbling about black snow in the Pamir passes. His last camel died chewing its own saddle. You wonder if it was the cold or the irony that killed it. Global trade didn't just decline. It shattered like glass on cobblestones. Byzantine gold coins, once accepted from Paris to Punjab, now buy less than a handful of maggoty grain. In Antioch, merchants burn sacks of pepper for warmth. It's cheaper than firewood. You've heard of the Venetian traders selling their wives to settle debts. Here's a fact modern economists love. Mediterranean shipwrecks tripled in the 530s. Turns out sailors with scurvy make terrible navigators. A black market dealer offers you holy air from Mount Ararat, sealed in clay jars. You buy one. It smells suspiciously like donkey piss and despair. Historians still argue whether this collapse triggered the Dark Ages or merely previewed them. You don't care about eras. You're too busy watching the mob strip the dead survivors' boots. The leather fetches 2 silver pennies. In this new world, even corpses have resale value. Winter comes early again. Not the crisp, bright cold of your childhood, but a damp, creeping chill that slithers into your bones and takes up residence. The river hasn't fully thawed in 2 years. Its surface a scarred patchwork of gray ice and rotting fish. You've started calling this endless season God's forgetting, those years when heaven misplaced the sun. Scientists will later dub it the Late Antique Little Ice Age, a centuries-long freeze possibly triggered by the 536 catastrophe. Tree rings show stunted growth until 640 AD. Imagine, your great-grandchildren might still be shivering through this. Historians debate whether volcanoes alone caused it or if Earth's orbit conspired against you. Meanwhile, you're stuffing your tunic with dried moss and trying not to wonder which will give out first, your body or the calendar. Here's a bleak survival tip. Scandinavian raiders started pillaging earlier because their farms froze solid. Some days you envy their solution. At least violence warms the blood. A traveling scholar claims the Nile froze in 540 AD, crocodiles sleeping like stones beneath the ice. You don't believe him until you find a fox mid-leap by the creek, flash frozen in a pounce. It makes decent stew once you chip off the ice crystals. As you huddle by the fire, burning what was once your front door, your neighbor jokes that hell must have frozen over. No one laughs. The thought of an afterlife this cold is worse than no afterlife at all. The stranger collapses at your threshold like a puppet with cut strings. His breath rattles, a Lombard accent clinging to his words like burrs to wool. "Valley, 3 days west," he gasps. "Apples still grow there." You press your knife to his throat, certain this is some fever dream, until he produces a withered core from his pouch. The scent punches through years of decay, sweet, alive. Your hands shake so badly you nearly drop it. Survivors have gotten creative. In Dalmatia, they ferment pine needles into something vaguely resembling wine. Breton fishermen weave nets from their own hair. You've mastered crow traps using shiny pebbles. Pro tip, their wings thicken broth nicely. Historians will later debate whether this ingenuity was courage or madness. The truth? Some thrived, like the Sicilian fishermen who got rich selling famine bread made from crushed seashells and gull eggs. Tastes like despair, but floats longer than hope. Your Lombard guest coughs blood into the embers. With his last breath, he whispers coordinates like a prayer. You commit them to memory, then burn his body with proper rites, not for his soul, but yours. Tomorrow, you'll head west. Either you'll find those apples, or fertilize them. Fair trade. The storyteller's voice creaks like an unoiled hinge as he spins tales of the sky serpent that swallowed the sun. The village children, their bellies swollen with hunger, but eyes wide with fearful wonder, lean in closer. You should shoo them to bed, but the dragon makes as much sense as anything else these days. At least monsters can be slain. Myths multiply like flies on a corpse. In Germania, they speak of Fimbulwinter, the 3-year freeze heralding Ragnarok. Breton sailors swear they've seen phantom ships crewed by skeletons off Cornwall. You've personally heard 5 versions of how Saint Michael battled a smoke demon over Rome, each more embellished than the last. Historians still argue whether these stories hindered recovery or helped souls endure. Here's the delicious irony. Some legends hold kernels of truth. The Irish annals of Innisfallen describe blood rain that perfectly matches volcanic hashfall. As for the dragon tales, turns out finding dinosaur bones in sulfur-rich soil makes for compelling evidence. You toss another chunk of what was once a church pew onto the fire. The storyteller begins anew. The hero tricked the sun into returning by... The children's eyes reflect the flames. Against your better judgment, you find yourself leaning in too. Hope may be the most dangerous hunger of all. The dawn breaks, truly breaks, for the first time in years. Not the sickly glow you've grown accustomed to, but golden, searing light that stabs through your eyelids like a dagger. You stand in the ruined field, bare feet sinking into thawing earth, and weep without shame. The air smells different, not of ash, but of mud and possibility. Somewhere, a bird sings. You'd forgotten birds could sing. Recovery comes in fits and starts. The Byzantine tax collector who arrived last week had meat on his bones. Rumors whisper of ships reaching Alexandria again. Your neighbor's skeletal hen laid an egg, smaller than a walnut, but still. Historians will later call this the turning point, though they'll squabble over exact dates. Modern ice cores can pinpoint the moment sulfate levels dropped. You don't need core samples. You feel it in your marrow, like a fever breaking. Here's the strangest epiphany. Some scholars argue this catastrophe birthed the medieval world. The famine shattered old hierarchies. The plague reshaped labor. Survivors developed a ruthless pragmatism that would define the coming age. You don't care about grand theories. You're too busy marveling at the weed pushing through cracked earth. Its leaves the greenest thing you've seen in a decade. Tonight, it'll flavor your broth. As the sun sets, properly sets, painting the sky in colors you'd nearly forgotten, you realize the most terrifying truth of all. You've begun to hope again. The world didn't end. It bent, cracked, but didn't break. And you, against all odds, you're still here. The fire pops softly as you stretch your legs toward the hearth. It's the first time in years you've burned wood just for warmth, not survival. Outside, an owl calls, a sound so ordinary it feels miraculous. Future scholars will write countless treatises about sulfate levels in ice cores, dendrochronological records, and epidemiological models, but you know the real truth. Survival wasn't about grand strategies. It was about boiling leather when your stomach screamed, about huddling with strangers who became family, about noticing the exact day the birds returned. The scars remain, of course. You'll always flinch at hazy skies, always count food stores twice. But the earth, stubborn old crone that she is, keeps turning. Seeds take root, wounds scar over. Life stumbles forward, clumsy but unbroken. As the last embers fade to glowing eyes in the dark, you let your own eyes close. The nightmare is over. Tomorrow, the sun will rise, really rise. And for the first time in years, that thought doesn't terrify you.